Uh, Joining me is Sky News Business Editor Ross Greenwood, host of Business Today. Every weekday, Sky News at 4:30. I urge you to look at it. Great show. Ross, what a huge day when it seems to me a lot of nasty chickens are coming home to roost. Now, first, let's go to this decision by the Australian Energy Market Operator to essentially take over the power stations in every state except Western Australia, to force them to operate when it says, pump out as much electricity as it says and at a price that it says. It seems to me like a terrible signal to investors.
So what is that? Is that the nationalisation of the Australian energy market? After all, state governments sold all these off years and years ago, on the promise that we would have cheaper electricity long term and that we would have more electricity out there. But what we've had is successive governments who have been philosophically driven and really put their philosophies ahead of the science, which means that you've got to get electrons into the system no matter where they come from. They haven't provided the incentive to invest in the right areas to make certain that there is a plentiful supply of electricity for households and also for business. And as a result, our electricity prices now become among some of the highest in the world as a result of a coincidence of events, which includes gas prices, coal prices, and then also the fact that it's the middle of winter and as a result you don't get as much solar and you don't get as much wind power into the system. That's fundamentally what's happened.
It's so extraordinary, but you mentioned the word nationalisation. It's absolutely true. It's sort of a green socialism at work. The government essentially taking over assets, power assets, and forcing some of them to operate at a loss with the promise, we might compensate you at a rate we deem later down the track. Mate, I just wonder, who would invest in Australia's power system when you see governments taking over assets like this? Just because they're in a pickle. They've ruined the whole industry and now they're socialising it temporarily to try to get out of a hole.
Crazy situations emerged, right? So there's not enough electricity, so they put a cap on the prices, which they say, well, if you start to generate, you're going to take, that $400 or rather $300 per megawatt hour if you're generating electricity. It's going to be $40 per gigajoule if you've got gas, and that's it. So if your costs are higher than that, as you say, you generated a loss. But then there's a lot of other players who sit there and say, well, we know how this game works. We'll just sit back here, wait until the prices go much, much higher, and we'll hold back our generation. So as a result of that, they got themselves to a point where there was a serious danger of blackouts on the east coast of Australia. They couldn't have that either politically or indeed socially. It's not a good thing in the middle of winter to have the power going out. And so really, they've had to step in and really take over the whole system, where they now have control of every power station on the east coast of Australia. Ultimately, as you point out, somebody's going to have to pay for these losses that these power stations are incurring, which guess who it's going to be? You and me, the taxpayer, who will have to effectively subsidise these power stations to try and get them back on stream.